Hi, I'm Bismuth, and I think that most color limitations in Minecraft are completely meaningless. This city behind me is made only with vanilla Minecraft blocks, and today I'm going to show you the process behind it, or at least the very basics of it. My builds rely a lot on layered glass gradients, and that's how, if you look at the background of this build, you'll see that some of the buildings look much farther away than others, even though they're only a couple of blocks farther back. It's a very helpful technique to have because it allows you to create the illusion of distance while also letting you change the color in the background. The most important part of this is that it allows for a lot of layering. Layering is kind of my bread and butter when it comes to building. I use it a lot so that way I can get better colors, more smooth shapes, and I used it a lot in the build behind me. So today I'm going to start off showing you how to make a glass gradient, and then I'm going to go into the very basics of some of this layer. To start off, you're going to want two colors of glass. For this gradient, I'm just going to be using pink and magenta. Now these glass colors are close enough that they kind of look like a little mini gradient on their own, but we can do a lot better. See, by alternating between these blocks twice and then putting the same alternating pattern in front, but just 2 blocks instead of 1, you'll make a much smoother gradient. But see, the really nice thing about this is that this pattern, it can repeat however much you want. So now I'm going to do the same thing again, but with 4 blocks in front. 4 blocks of pink, 4 blocks of magenta, and then I'm going to just repeat the same pattern that I just used to make that glass gradient before behind this new one. In all honesty, glass gradients look really complicated, but they're one of the easiest gradient types you can ever mess with. At the end of the day, they all follow a nice set pattern, and even if that pattern isn't technically the best, it will produce some pretty good results every time. So I'm going to add the last layer that I'm going to do for this gradient. You can take this however many layers you want. I've done up to 10 in builds, but I'm just going to keep it at 4 for this tutorial because it's nice and simple and pretty easy to keep track of. So what I'm going to use now is just a little bit of World Edit to go ahead and stack this, so that way I just have a bunch of copies in this and it makes one nice square. World Edit, of course, is not necessary for this particular technique. I just use it because it speeds things up a fair bit and I wanted to just get on with the rest of building. Just for the sake of showing it, I'm also going to go ahead and do this with a different color too. So this one's going to be between purple and cyan, and I'm also going to go ahead and show you what adding a third color into it ends up looking like. I also just wanted to go ahead and acknowledge that this is basically just counting in binary but shown in Minecraft glass blocks, and yes, it does make a gradient. It's not going to be the perfect one because glass, for some reason in Minecraft, does not have a 50-50 transparency. If it did, this would be the perfect glass gradient. Technically, there are better patterns, but they aren't as easy to remember, so I just stick with this. The difference between this pattern and any other pattern at this level is pretty hard to notice, so it's going to effectively be a really good pattern anyways. So now that we're done with this vertical glass gradient, that means that it's time to start adding in the next color. The color I'm going to be using for this one is just your standard pink Minecraft glass, and I'm going to go ahead and add that in, following, yes, the exact same pattern that I have been using this entire time. Basically, when it comes to making a Minecraft glass gradient, as long as you've got this pattern down, it's going to go just fine. I'm going to speed along on this over where I'm actually building this pattern, so that way once it's done, if you'd like to screenshot it, you can. Basically, all that you're going to need to do to make a 2-color glass gradient from this is replace the air with a different glass color. Now that I have this done, I'm just going to go ahead and stack it upward as I've done with a few different things so far in this video. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move it so that way the layers of this pink gradient, well, it's not a gradient, but you get the idea, are in between the layers of the glass gradient that I already have. So now I'm going to move on to the second part of this, which is showing the basics of layering. Layering is something that I use in basically all of my builds. If it ever looks like it's a painting or a background or anything like that, you can rest assured that I'm probably doing a lot of layering in it. When I'm talking about layering in terms of these Minecraft builds, what I mean specifically is taking different elements and layering them in between the layers of a glass gradient. So there are a lot of things to keep in mind with that. Like one of the things is how far back you put an element in the glass gradient will impact how visible it is. So right now I'm working on the last layer of this, which is going to be very far in the back, and that means that I'm just going to use some completely plain rectangles for part of this because it's going to be hard to see anyways through all the glass. The closer you get to the front, the more obvious any changes in color or any details are going to be. So as I move forward in this layered build, what I will do is I will make it so that way I make the buildings towards the front more detailed, and I will make it so that way the colors are a bit more subtle, because at the end of the day, you'll be able to see more of it through the glass. Something else you'll notice me doing, because this is a city build, is I'm using furnaces, smokers, blast furnaces that are lit versus not lit to indicate lights being on or off in different rooms. The next important tip with making a layered build like the stuff I do is as you go towards the front, you're going to want those layers to have more space in between them. As I said previously, the closer you get to the front, the more that each individual detail will be visible. So as you get closer to the front, you're going to want to have room for all the new details that you can accommodate. Speaking of those added layers, let's go ahead and put them to good use now, shall we? So I'm going to go ahead and start making a few buildings, and in this case, I'm going to have it where I'm using mob spawners as a layer over one of them because, you know, I have to, it's for the meme. And for the other, I'm starting out with a bit of deep slate. Now what I end up doing over the deep slate is I go and I replace it, some of it with glowstone, some of it with iron bars, and I'm going to go ahead and use that as a nice pattern to look kind of like a bunch of windows on a skyscraper. From here I go on and I just use a few different end rods to look kind of like more lines of lights going up the skyscraper in the background. And then I start adding some beautiful little end game mini trees. Yes, that's made with a bunch of dragon eggs. And then I start adding fake car lights behind it. I do this little trick with end rods and redstone torches to kind of pull off looking like different car lights at night. It's a little bit iffy at this scale, but it still works pretty well. The last thing I add into this are a bunch of little end rods. If they're facing forwards, they look like stars kind of, and I figured that that would work pretty well for this since it already looked like the build was at night. I added a couple more details to the left skyscraper and just added a few more lights, and with that, this little build is done. So that's kind of what goes into my decisions on how layers work for these builds. If you have any questions on it, please comment them down below, and I would love to answer them as best as I can anyways. As I said before, these are the basics of how I build. Now, you might be wondering does that mean that there's a lot more to cover? And the answer is yeah, absolutely there is. But if you get these things down, then you'll have some of the main techniques that I use to create builds like the one behind me, which, although it's a work in progress, is to this day probably the most impressive thing I've built. If you've made it this far in the video, consider subscribing. It's free and it'll keep you updated on any tutorials that I post in the future, where I might go into more of the details on the techniques that I use in builds like this tree behind me. As always, thanks to my patrons, your support really does mean the whole world to me, and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye.